Word on the street is the starters will play against the New Orleans Saints. What are the three things we want to see this weekend?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Thursday episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome in our new listeners and viewers to the Locked On Texan podcast. If you are first time here, make sure you subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube. If you are a part of our returning family members, thank you guys for coming back as we talk Texans. I am your Texan football analyst, John, some sports guy Hickman. Of course, I'm joined by a Texan Credential Media member, Cody Davis, Kobe Day.
Yes, sir.
Mambo.
Yes, sir.
For today, we're going to look at the Houston Texans' latest cornerback addition. Who could benefit the most by playing in Saturday's preseason game? But the three things we want to see versus the Saints, Cody, D'Amico Ryans, everybody's playing. What's on that? What's going on with that?
Yes, sir. So, this was kind of expected because, as everybody know, the Texans and the Saints canceled their joint practice. And at first, the plan was for just to let the guys who are on the bubble and making a 53-man roster, or like Coach D'Amico Ryan said today, you just want to give, some of the guys an opportunity to just go out there and put good film on. But with the Texans and the Saints canceling their joint practice, that kind of changed up the plan. And that meant that the Houston Texans, everybody on their roster as of right now, the healthy guys at least, will have an opportunity to play against the New Orleans Saints this Sunday. And of course, that means CJ Stroud. Yes, he will be starting for the third consecutive preseason game. Coach D'Amico Ryans did say at least the first team, because that's what he did when he was asked, about whether or how much the starters were going to play. If you go back and take a look at the press conference, he went, well, all of the first team are going to play at least 2 series. So, yeah, we look like we're going to have a full house inside the Superdome come Sunday.
So Cody and I, we're going to talk about the three things we want to see versus the Saints. We thought we'd talk about that by bringing back the Locked On Texan podcast game show. So let's bring it back. Come on, let's the music. All right, Cody. So number one, 3 things you want to see from CJ Stroud in the 2 series he'll be playing in.
I want to see CJ Stroud finish a drive with a touchdown. I want to see him connect with each one of his receivers at least once. And I want to see him get the ball out quicker than we've seen over the last 2 games.
All right. So number 2, what are you expecting to see from Dameon Pierce that you haven't seen yet?
Better blocking. Ever since the start of OTAs, that is something that he has been talking about. And over the and when you go back to Saturday's game, it don't seem like the improvements was there, but that's what I want to see from Dameon.
Lastly, will John Mechie get over 2 targets, and how long should he play?
I'm going to say yes, 2 targets, and he should play at least a half.
All right. Let's go.
All righty, John. So since you gave me CJ, it's kind of ironic because I gave you Will. What are 3 things that you want to see from Will Anderson on Sunday?
I want to continue to see him use that motor to get after the quarterback. I want to see him affect the passing game a little bit more. And I also want to see him continue to make those tackle for losses while playing along that defensive line.
Question number 2, what do you want to see from this offensive line who is still going to be pretty banged up when they go inside NOLA?
The growth from Kenyon Green and the growth from the rookie, Juice Scruggs, right? We know when Titus Howard gets back, the offensive line will play better. But the middle of that offensive line, you got some youth there, so you want to see the continue to grow and build off what they did against the Miami Dolphins.
And question number 3, some people had a little issue of how the Texans handled that. I think it was 3rd-and-1 against the Miami Dolphins. So with that being said, John, what do you want to see from this Houston Texans coaching staff in this final preseason game?
I want them to play this final preseason game as a regular season. So play calling. I think because the NFL is so fast now, your guys got to be ready, and what better way to get them ready than real reps in the game. So treat this game as a regular season game and decisive decisions.
There you have it, the Locked On Texans podcast game show.
Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, theater near you. Listen, with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can finally stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. To snag tickets without the stress, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this latest installment of Locked On Texans. So, as we talked about in the first segment, everybody for the Houston Texans will play in that final preseason game. And John, look, even though we are sitting here talking about what we want to see from Will Anderson, CJ, Damian Pierce, a lot of the guys that we know without a shadow of a doubt, they will be on that 53-man roster. There are a handful of guys. It's like this last preseason game is going to be very important for them. So in the second segment, I just want us to take a look at some of the guys how this third preseason game is going to be very beneficial for them. And the number one guy that's at the top of my list, we talked about him on yesterday, saying that he's on the bubble of making a 53-man roster. Some people in the comments saying that they don't believe he even have a chance, but I'm looking at number one guy on my list, Shaq Griffin. This is a guy came in because we thought that the relationship between Steven Nelson and the Houston Texans, we thought it was a done deal. However, Nelson has been, if I could make a list of top 10 players in training camp, I'll probably put him at number 3 because once again, 15 takeaways throughout training camp, and he has 4 along with interceptions. However, everything that I thought I was going to see out of Shaq Griffin, I haven't seen it. And I still think there is a small opportunity that he will be a part of this 53-man roster. However, he needs to make sure that he balls out in this final preseason game. Another guy that I'm looking at on that defensive side of the ball is Garrett Wallow. The 2021 draft class is not looking good, and don't be surprised when you get that 53-man roster. The only guys that you see on there is Roy Lopez, who, by the way, you're talking about somebody's stock that has risen throughout training camp. He has been one of them. Nico Collins, and of course, Davis Mills. Garrett Wallow, this is a young man over his first 2 seasons. I've seen the promise. I've seen the potential. However, whether it was the defensive scheme that he was playing with or him just battling through nagging injuries, he hasn't done enough to say, you know what, he is going to be a part of this 53-man roster. And especially when you consider how talented, how good that linebacking core has been, possibly ever since OTAs, he definitely needs to make sure that he balls out in New Orleans for that final game. The last guy on my list in terms of how important this last preseason game could be, Dare Ogunbowale. I thought at the start of training camp, this guy was definitely going to be a part of the 53-man roster. But when you look at the additions that the Texans made to their backfield, especially the addition of Devin Singletary, as I mentioned on yesterday, because Devin Singletary, his best attribute is to be a pass-catching running back out of the backfield. It's like, what do you need Dare Ogunbowale for? So he is another guy that needs to make sure that he balls out in this final preseason game, because if he doesn't, he's going to be one of the guys that we look at and say, oh, well, that wasn't a surprise.
Yeah, I think every cornerback not named Derek Stingley and Steven Nelson
that's a good one.
Yeah, like specifically Tavier Thomas, Shaq Griffin, as you mentioned, Jacoby Francis, and this may be a shocker coming from me, but I'm even going to throw Desmond King's name out there. I don't see Houston keeping 3 slot corners. King definitely has the lead over the group, but the battle between Thomas and Francis, I think, is interesting. I think whoever closes out strong this weekend will win that battle. And I'm leaning towards Francis right now. Also, the next guy I'm picking is not because the roster spot is in jeopardy, but just because they need this time on the field. John Mechie. By the way, John Mechie has lined up more in the slot than wide out. Tank Dell, if you want to know, has played majority of his snaps in the wide out, lined up wide. So just some interesting numbers. But back to Mechie, 33 total snaps. Limited opportunities just isn't ideal. While Houston hasn't been cautious with Mechie during camp, the game opportunities have kind of left me thirsty for a little bit more. So whether it's on the field with CJ Stroud, which I want to see Mechie and Stroud on the field together, or if it's with Case Keenum or Davis Mills, I want to see Mechie on the field. I think this is beneficial because he is nearly 2 seasons removed from football up until like 3 to 4 weeks ago. So real reps matter to me. And I think that this game 3 is perfect for him to get adjusted more to the NFL.
And I also want to throw this in there as well. This final preseason game is also very important for CJ Stroud as well. Look, of course, look, we ain't talking just because, is he gonna make the 53-man? No, without a shadow of doubt, that'd be stupid. But I think at this point, it's safe to say that he quote unquote won the starting quarterback battle. And I'm expecting him at least to start in Baltimore come week 1 of the regular season. I don't think CJ Stroud is going to, set the league on fire and bring the Houston Texans to like 11 wins or whatever the case might be. But you know me, John, I'm all about giving young players time to develop. But at the same time, I want to see CJ Stroud go out there and showcase one, while the naysayers was wrong about how the way they tried to crucify him throughout the draft process with all them stupid tactics that they try to put on him. But 2, and most importantly, I feel like CJ, if he can get his career off to a really good start, he would definitely live up to the title of being this organization's next franchise quarterback. And I think with this preseason game, look, I wouldn't be mad if the Texans throw him out there for another half because I want to see him go through his read against an opposing team's defense. And he even talked about that after that Miami Dolphins game. He talked about how the joint practices that he did have going through that experience is part of the reason why we saw him have a better game against the Dolphins when you go back and you take a look at the first 2 series that he played against the New England Patriots. And look, one of the things that I've been raving about in terms of CJ Stroud's attribute is watching him not make the same mistakes twice. And I know one of the mistakes that I remember looking at in the game against the Dolphins, it was on that very first drive when it was like, 3rd and goal or something like that. It seems like he was struggling to set his feet. It was a play action. Instead of him rolling right, he rolled left. And the way he had released the ball, it just didn't look right. You might know what play I'm talking about. But I forgot. He was targeting the tight end, but it wasn't Dalton Schultz. I can't remember who it was. But, it's just those little things. I'm like, okay, I want to see you, just get adjusted to setting your feet. I just want to see you get the ball out quicker. I want to see you just going through your read against an opposing team's defense. And I just think Sunday, like I said, I wouldn't be mad if he play half the game, but it would definitely be beneficial for him.
Shout out to Dan Orlovsky, ESPN, man. They were showing CJ Stroud some love on the ESPN. And I think that's good. Houston has not had that in a very long time. So, but you're right. I think this game is important for CJ. I've been calling for this all week. CJ should play. And I think that hopefully Tank Dell plays. I want to see some more first team with that as well. But CJ needs to be out there. He is not a vet. He's a rookie with only 16 passing attempts so far. Not ideal. And I'm glad he's playing. Welcome back in, Locked On Texan listeners and viewers. We just talked about if you're not named Derek Stingley or Steve Nelson, you need to be on the field Saturday. So I'm glad that that's going to be happening. Big game, I think, for all of those cornerbacks, not named those 2. but the Houston Texans did sign Cameron Dantzler. Cody, you guys had an opportunity to talk to D'Amico Ryans about that decision. What was going on at practice?
Well, before we move forward, I do want to give you guys some quick background information about Cameron. He was a third-round pick by the Minnesota Vikings in 2020. He's been pretty productive throughout his career. However, injuries is part of the reason why he has been kind of bouncing around over the past couple of months. He began OTAs with the Washington Commanders, and then he had an opportunity to spend some time in with mandatory minicamp, and I believe the first half of training camp with the Buffalo Bills before signing with the Houston Texans Monday afternoon. And John, this is a guy last year with the Minnesota Vikings. He finished the season with 50 tackles, 5 pass deflection. He actually recorded the game-winning fumble recovery when the Vikings beat the Chicago Bears doing, I believe it was like a week 5, week 6 victory. So once again, this guy is pretty productive when he's healthy. And when Coach D'Amico Ryans was asked about the signing of Cameron, he said that they signed Cameron to add depth to that cornerback position. And that was kind of telling to me because I'm looking at this from a standpoint. I was always under the impression that that cornerback position is one of the deepest positions that you have. And ever since the signing of Shaq Griffin, we have been talking about Derek Stingley, Steve Nelson, Griffin, Desmond King, Tavier Thomas, and that doesn't include somebody like Kobe Francis, who just on yesterday, John, you talked about him being one of the guys whose stock has risen throughout training camp. So I wonder if the Texans are looking at Cameron and thinking to themselves, we about to make a surprise cut in at this position group, because I just don't buy the fact that you're going to bring in a guy like Cameron, who, once again, keywords, when healthy, yes, he's been productive, but it's at a position where it already has quite a bit of depth. So that is something that you definitely want to keep your eyes on. We're going to see him come Sunday. We can see if he can make some noise, and just don't be surprised if this signing actually change up the plans that who you thought you was going to be seeing at this position group throughout the season.
And with signing Cameron Dantzler, the Houston Texans released Alec Bachman.
I was surprised by that, man.
Yeah, Bachman is having a good camp, man. Caught a touchdown, but he was released in favor of Cameron. So I honestly, I believe what you're saying, Cody. The cornerback room, I think, is something Houston is really looking forward to improving, and we'll see how it works out. Thank you guys for checking out today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you give me a follow at John_Hickman12 and follow Locked On Texans on Twitter at Locked On Texans.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.